Welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast, where we break down the practical applications of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. This is your host, executive and life coach Meredith Oak, with a quick reminder that podcasts are conversations, not consultations. But if you're looking for one of those, do check out our free practitioner directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. So last week I had a beautiful conversation with Stephen McGee about the power of leadership and how even quiet people have the capacity to step into leadership and how much that is needed right now, especially you. Yes, I'm talking to you. If you're listening to this podcast, that I know you're probably listening to dozens others, as well as all the books you read, all the research you do, all the personal experience you have. You're very valuable to the world. You really are. And last week's conversation was a real challenge to step into leadership if you aren't already and to up your game if you already are. And this week, I have a returning guest, Kelley Erickson, and we get into the nitty-gritty of what it feels like to make that kind of change, to become a person who leaves what Kelley calls trauma consciousness and victim consciousness to be someone who is an active participant in the world. She breaks things down to a granular level that'll be incredibly helpful. Kelley started her journey healing her addiction and her circadian rhythms and has created a really beautiful quantum coherence series that brings it all together. And I have found over the years that one of the absolute best ways to heal is to listen to stories and to engage with people who are deeply engaged in the healing process themselves and are able to articulate that. And Kelley is definitely one of those people. She is in it and she is not afraid to talk about it and share about it in a deeply courageous and vulnerable way that I really appreciate. So we had a really interesting conversation. There are a lot of really practical tips in here for how to manage ourselves and move through challenge and help ourselves, support ourselves to do things that feel a little bit scary, but that are what is required for the next phase of our growth, which means the world's growth as well. So enjoy this conversation with Kelley Erickson and I. And don't forget, as we are heading into the depths of winter, how important it is to get extra infrared light on your body, whether it's through red light therapy panels or infrared sauna. I added infrared sauna to my winter routine a couple of years ago, and it made a huge, huge difference to my life. I really recommend it. You can go and rent a sauna in a gym or a spa near your house. Or if you want to have one inside your house, a simple way to do that is to get a sauna blanket. Bond Charge, our brand partner, makes a great one. If you go to bondcharge.com and take a look at their sauna blanket and put QBC in the discount box at checkout for a little discount from us. I do, however you want to get your infrared light, I just really, please do it. This is super, super crucial, especially at this time of year. All right, my friends, enjoy this conversation with me and Kelley. Hi, Kelley Erickson. Welcome back to the QVC podcast. It is so good to see you again.
Yes, good to see you as well, Meredith. Thank you for having me back.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I love following your journey. You do such a nice job of sharing on Instagram. I think it's a real gift for people who are able to communicate that way because it reaches so many people, and you do like a really beautiful job.
Thank you very much.
I love that. All right. So you have like a really incredible kind of healing story that is, as with everybody, ongoing. So let's start with the circadian piece and tell us sort of how you came to that and just a high level explanation of why it matters so much.
Sure. So when I began this journey, I had just gotten sober. I was trying to help my son with his health stuff, but I also had my own health issues. I had PTSD and CPTSD. Um, and so, through the process of trying to get him back to a state of wellness, I also was working on myself and applied anything that I asked him to do. So, um, we came across the quantum community and we were told about the ketogenic diet and sunlight. And so we began to implement it, and I saw rapid changes, not just in my son, but in myself as well. I really was just hoping to lose weight. Like, that's what my goal was. I had no idea that what I was doing was going to have such a profound impact on me. I had nightmares. I had significant anxiety, depression, ruminating thoughts, intrusive thoughts. And so all of this began to shift really what I felt really rapidly because I was over 40 years old and I had experienced this most of my life. So when I started to feel these changes, I wanted to know exactly what was going on. So I began to study. I followed some really important people on Instagram and in the quantum community, and just began to absorb as much as I could. And I learned some really important things about our circadian timing system and how it's in relationship to our stress management system and our energy management system. So, our circadian timing system consists of a master clock inside of our brain, and it's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And then we have these little peripheral clocks all throughout the body, and they need to be in sync with each other, in relationship with each other to communicate about time within the body. And this tells our hormones and, all these different processes throughout the body what time of day they should be functioning. And so when we use sunlight and really key specific times of sunlight, we can help reset this system. And so immediately I saw improvements in my sleep, improvements in my mood, but also because the circadian timing system is in relationship with the stress management system, I was also better able to regulate my moods and my emotions. I want to be careful how I say this because I don't want to give the wrong idea, but um, I began to feel like a different person. And so through this, the studying that I did, I discovered there's a lot taking place inside the body that requires light as a primary signal in order for it to function optimally.
Okay, tell us a little more about what you found.
Yeah. So, you know, so my history, like I said, was PTSD and CPTSD. And when we have a history of trauma, we we know we call it stress, right? We have a massive amount of stress, and stress dysregulates the entire system. But more specifically, emotions dysregulate the entire system because we're not really taught how to bring awareness to our emotions. We're not really taught about how our perception plays into our emotions or can kind of keep our emotions from being processed. And so when we don't understand primary emotions, or what I call core emotions, which are anger, shame, and fear, then we begin to navigate the world from our space of perception or our feelings rather than our emotions. And our emotions and feelings are very different from each other. Feelings are emotions rather are they're primal, they're instinctual, they arise immediately. And feelings are the meaning that we give to the emotions. Most people live in the state of feeling and their perception of what's going on, which keeps triggering the emotional response. And so this leads us to the nervous system and how we view the nervous system through the polyvagal theory. So the polyvagal theory tells us that we have three primary states of nervous system activation. So we have the fight response, we have the flight response, we have the freeze response, and then kind of collapse or fawn are in there as well. And so the fight response is associated with anger. That's the primary emotion that drives that response. Then we have fear, which drives the flight response. And we have freeze, which drives, or shame, which drives the freeze response. And we have problems with nervous system regulation because we don't know how to navigate those three primary emotions. And so understanding that these emotions are core emotions, and emotions are energy in motion, right? And energy is information. So these emotions are designed to inform us about our environment, about our experience, but we're not using that information. We're living in a space of feeling, and that's perception. And our perception is developed from, beginning stages of life, and it's largely personality driven. It has a lot to do with our unique experiences. And so we disconnect from emotions and we live primarily in feelings, and this creates a disconnect between the mind and the body because we need to understand where things are coming from and how our nervous system is becoming dysregulated. But these three primary emotions of anger, shame, and fear, it's also what we call the ego, because the ego is this protective mechanism that is designed to keep us safe when we're navigating the world. But if we're stuck in these three primary emotions, we're essentially stuck in the ego. And this kind of takes us into the world of consciousness. And when we look at consciousness through David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, right at the bottom of the scale, we see shame. And and so that's the freeze response again. And so if, when we go out seeking a healing journey, there are so many places where we get kind of hung up. So, like, the first place people usually seek healing is through food. That's the most obvious, right? And then they'll see some improvements with changing their nutrition, and then maybe they add exercise. And from exercise, they might, add a little bit of meditation or a little bit of this, but still they're stuck. And what I get a lot of clients saying is that they feel like they lack purpose or that they're disconnected from themselves, but they are seemingly normal, everyday people. They can, have jobs and do all of these things, but they're still very disconnected. And when I ask them about their emotional states or their primary nervous system states, they have a very difficult time identifying which states they live in and which emotions that they're primarily experiencing. And so we begin to use language as a tool to inform us about what we're experiencing. And I think there's a lot of language can be a tool or a weapon. And so developing discernment within language can be really helpful in understanding not just what's happening with inside of us, but also what we're experiencing in the external world. And so shame is this kind of takes us back to our last podcast together. Sorry if I am jumping around a little bit, but I was really wanting to explain this for anyone who may have listened to our last podcast together, because I messed it up. I was on the verge of tears the entire time. I was so worried about getting all of the details right, and I didn't want to mess things up. And it's this kind of perfectionistic desire to control my image and kind of feeling like an imposter. And when we got off that call, I wanted to quit everything. I was like, that's it. I'm never showing my face again. I can't do this. I don't belong here. And it took me a couple of weeks to really understand what was happening. And I was actually listening to a podcast on homeschooling, and it occurred to me what was happening. So I view you as an authority in the field of quantum biology. Um, and I didn't, I viewed myself as an authority within my own framework. But when I was coming to do the podcast with you, authority to authority, it felt like confrontation in my nervous system. So I went into freeze mode and I could not think. Like, I just couldn't recall anything. I was so confused. And so this led me back to the work I'd already been doing on consciousness. And I went back to David Hawkins' book, and where he discussed shame. And I was like, oh, that's what it was. I was experiencing shame in that moment because I viewed you as an authority. And when we have shame, it robs us of our personal authority. It robs us of our own personal power. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is what's happening. I was triggering my own shame based on my perceptions, based upon a narrative that I had developed early in childhood about my own self-worth. And I was like, phew, I can breathe now. Oh my goodness. It was so, the universe, I think, gives us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it. But it's what we do with it that makes or breaks us. And so I could have gone into a hole and deleted my Instagram profile and never did the work again and never showed my face. But instead, I was like, okay, I can do this now that I know what I'm working with. And even right now, my face is turning a little bit red. And that kind of indicates that I'm experiencing a little bit of shame. But I'm not afraid of it anymore. And because I can identify it and I know exactly what's happening, it doesn't overwhelm me in the same way that it did a year ago when we had that initial podcast. So then through, all of the work and my studies on quantum biology and their circadian timing system, what I then discovered is that emotions and our experience of time are like in a marriage together. They're intimately linked up. And we know, or, I think it's definitive that time and space are constructs of perception. They don't, like, reality isn't actually dependent upon them. And our mind is what creates time in order for us to make sense of the world. And when we have these emotional experiences, extremely overwhelming emotional experiences that we don't process, where we experience anger, shame, and fear, what we're doing is we're altering our perception of time. And it's not just our perception of time, but it's actually we're messing with our timing mechanisms within the body. Because, like I said, that stress management system and the circadian timing system are in this bi directional relationship with each other. And so it's like, oh my gosh, of course, it's all connected. It's all one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And then we come right back to the circadian piece
Yeah.
and how intentionally living within the natural cycles of that are is regulating our nervous system on an emotional level.
Yes.
Whew,
Yeah.
Kelley.
Yeah.
Wow, I love it.
Yeah.
And I also want to acknowledge you and thank you for sharing about your emotional experience. You know, we communicated briefly about it in messages, but that is like, you know, first of all, thank you for being vulnerable enough and brave enough to share what your experience was, and to keep going. You know, and it's funny, like there's a few things I want to say, right? It's like in my mind, I'm just like a lady interviewing people and I'm excited to hear people's stories. But I have had that feedback multiple times that people feel very nervous. And so I had invited someone on the podcast and she didn't write back right away. And I was like, and I thought of you and I wrote her again and I was like, I'm just really excited to hear your story. And here's what I'm thinking we're going to talk about. It's just going to be fun, you know. And she was like, oh, okay, thanks. I was really scared to book it.
Yeah.
And I have the same thing too. I went on a bunch of podcasts a couple of years ago and I wasn't planning to. I had to step in because I was like planning for someone else. They'd been booked and I was kind of planning for someone else to do it. So I did it and I had that exact, like every single time I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I have no business doing this.
Yeah.
And yeah, I often have people circle back and be like, I forgot to say this or I didn't say that. So it's interesting because I do think that this platform, the platform of podcasting, which is available to anybody, if you know, you and Lauren have a beautiful podcast going now, like it really is a personal growth opportunity in a way that I did not see coming.
Yeah. Yes, it really is. And to look back at the first episode that Lauren and I recorded together versus this last episode that we just recorded with Morley Robbins, um, it's just a world of difference. And it's only been a year's time. I mean, granted, I am someone who does a lot of personal growth, you know, outside of these things, but you are confronted with parts of yourself that maybe you don't get to experience in your regular day-to-day interactions. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
vulnerable.
Yeah. And the authority piece, the being in the spotlight piece,
Yeah.
there's so many different pieces to it. Okay, so let's circle back to the circadian and the emotions. So that I think this is really interesting, the difference between emotions and feelings. So if I'm walking and I realize like I'm at the edge of a cliff and I'm like, and I have that like rush of panic that I'm going to fall off the edge of the cliff and I step back, that's an emotion.
Yes, that's fear.
And then, okay, so that's fear. And then if I start thinking like, oh my God, Meredith, I can't believe you'd be so stupid as to walk near the edge of a cliff. And what if I going to die? And then if I die, what's going to happen to my kids? And like those that I've gone into feelings.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And a lot of people, because they don't recognize the difference between the two, they will perpetuate the emotion, that feeling of fear, with the narrative or that self-talk that they keep doing with reliving the feelings. So like keep saying to yourself, I'm so stupid, I can't believe I did that. And every time you do that, you're re-triggering that fear response. And so your nervous system is just responding physiologically over and over and over again. And so a lot of the work that I do with clients is we start by mapping the nervous system. I have them write down several times a day their primary emotions, their primary behaviors, and their primary symptoms. And then we go back and we see what emotions, I mean, I can look at it and see what emotions they're experiencing on a pretty regular basis. And then we dive into that narrative and where it was developed as a child. Like, where did you learn that you were unworthy or unlovable or whatever it is, right? And just, we know from the observer effect, just that process of observation begins to shift things pretty massively. And then it's the healing spiral. We're given opportunities to revisit each emotion over and over again with a new level of awareness. And each time you bring a new level of awareness, you're observing it differently and you're shifting it again. And so we just keep repeating this pattern over and over again. And what we're doing is we're unburdening the heart. So we know from the Heart Math Institute, right, that there is heart-brain coherence. And when they are out of sync, primarily due to, these overwhelming, unprocessed emotions, we have a very chaotic toroidal field. And this toroidal field informs our relationship to other people. And so this is where we can get into like attachment wounds. And if you think about what information is being sent out from your heart in that electromagnetic field that extends up to 12, 15 feet from your body, what kind of information are you sending out to the people you're in relationship to? Is it one of fear? Is it one of anger? Is it one of shame? And then what is it attracting back to you in relationships? And so when I look at attachment wounds or attachment theory, that's really how I view it, is from that heart-brain coherence kind of field of information that we know about.
So cool. So it's like there's like a chaos in our frequency.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is what other people are sensing.
Yes. And then we're responding to theirs, right? And so it's being sent out and then coming back to us. So, it's this constant field of information informing our perception and our experience of where we sit within the world or within relationship to others. And so when we can work on heart-brain coherence through unburdening some of these emotions and then using things like the Heart Math Institute app, and you can use that, you create this coherent field of information that goes out. You are operating from a space of love, and then you are informing your relationship to other people of love, and it begins to balance out that electromagnetic signal and feedback system that you're getting when you're in relationship to other people.
So interesting.
Yeah.
And that would probably affect like who you choose to be around. I mean, I remember, so we have, a lot of things in common on our journey. And my husband, he said something to me one time. It was something, he's like, why do you always have to have like one totally crazy friend? And I was like, I don't know. But I always did. I was just somehow always attracted to an agent of chaos that I had to have. And there were other people, and they seemed who I could be friends with, but they seemed boring.
Uh-huh.
And as I healed, I was like, oh, they're not boring. They're just not chaotic.
Right. Right.
And it totally shifted. And I no longer have any agents of chaos by choice. There's a few I'm related to.
Yeah. Yeah. It does.
So that's like a super interesting lens to like understand that behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. And it changes our relationship with others uh, in a more profound way as well. So when we look at these emotions from David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, anger, shame, and fear sit below, well, fear and shame really sit below what is called the frequency of truth. And it's when we begin to rise above those frequencies that we begin to seek truth. And it's truth in all manners. And love is the ultimate truth frequency, in my opinion. And so as we navigate up and we begin to, unburden the heart with each layer, we get closer and closer to the truth or to the frequency of love. And I believe that love, in the way that we understand it from society's perspective, it's really it, we're given the perception that love is very transactional. It's I'm giving you love, I'm doing this out of love, etc. But I believe from my own personal experience that when we are the frequency of love, there it's not transactional at all. And we begin to see things like judgment or resentment or, these other kind of filters through which we experience other humans. They begin to dissolve, and we can see other people through a much more uh, unfiltered perception, I guess. So resentment and judgment would be filters that you are experiencing other people through. Um, and so love to me is much more about a frequency that we operate from. And then we begin to feed our relationships with this frequency. And it can help other people begin to balance out their instability, their chaos. It can inform their field of information. We know through nervous system regulation work that we can help others regulate their nervous system. It's called co-regulation, right? And that's what a mother does with her child when she picks up her baby after it's hurt itself. We can do that also from the frequency of love, and we begin to bring stability into all of our relationships. Now, this doesn't mean we control other people and it's automatically going to fix everything about them, but it does provide a platform of stability and coherence rather than chaos and, further instability.
Yes, beautiful. And then if we are creating that field or contributing to that field of love, and that becomes dominant, then we can help to regulate others who, I mean, I guess you probably have to be open to it to a certain extent, right? But just by being in that. And I'm thinking now of like recovery groups,
Mhm.
places like Alcoholics Anonymous, where you have that like container of acceptance, and it's so not the opposite of transactional, right? It's really vibrating at a frequency of love, and
Yep.
someone comes in who's an absolute at the bottom, as they say, and they are, at least for the duration of the time that they're in that space, they they can become regulated, and you see how it's that frequency of
Yeah.
love.
Yes, 100%. And it's interesting you brought up the AA groups because in David Hawkins' book, when he's talking about consciousness itself,
That's
yeah, it's Alcoholics Anonymous is one of the, few or many groups that vibrates at the frequency of truth. And it is that unconditional love, that lack of judgment that individuals bring into the room and help others recover.
That's right.
Yeah.
I forgot. He has a beautiful section on that.
Yep.
Yeah. he really understood that at a deep level. He was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have his book by my bed. It's just I open it randomly every couple of days.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's bring it back to, okay, we've talked about the difference between emotions and feelings and sort of stabilizing our toroidal field, so to speak, by being regulated in our nervous system and not be constantly pinging around between the feelings and the emotions. And let's explore a little more the role that nature and photons and darkness play in this landscape.
Yeah. So nature, of course, is like our original home. It is the place where, we evolved, as and so it's no surprise that when we go out into nature, there are all kinds of benefits that we can receive. So sunlight is one of them. We get photons of sunlight, and there's so much that we could talk about with sunlight specifically and helping it to regulate your emotional landscape or your nervous system, or your mitochondria. There's just so many benefits to sunlight. I think it's an equilibrium frequency, and it really does help bring us back into balance in so many different ways. You can go out into the woods and receive phytonicides from pine trees, and these are really beneficial for regulating the nervous system. You can go out and be around a waterfall or running water and get negative ions, or even in after a thunderstorm. There's negative ions in the air that are extremely beneficial. You can put your feet to the bare earth and receive electrons from the earth that help to regulate your nervous system and bring balance back in. Yeah, but also, like, when we're out in nature, our field, our connection to the quantum field is uninterrupted. And so I think when we go out into nature and we don't have the headphones on or the cell phone on our in our pocket, kind of sending these altered frequencies, I think this is the ultimate opportunity for connection to the quantum field, and where so many people, including myself, get our downloads, or these like aha moments, or some people might call them spiritual moments. And I think that's because there's no interference between us and the quantum field, and we have a very regulated nervous system. So I take a walk every single day, and that's where I get these, insights into things, or like my next idea for what I'm going to do. And, it just appears to come out of nowhere, but it's not. Walking is like moving meditation, all of these benefits that we can get from being outside, listening to the birds, and, the horizon has benefits, like watching the horizon. Walking down a straight and narrow road has benefits for your perception. I mean, you really can't beat time outside in any way.
Wow, so much there, and the moving around. You're reminding me. I watched this movie, I think last winter. It's old. It's old. It's on YouTube. You can find it. It's called Copenhagen, and it's about Niels Bohr and I forget all. Anyway, it's all these like early pioneers of quantum physics, and they have this. They're discussing all of the big breakthroughs that they had, and they were like, oh yeah, I remember that we'd be around the table like poring over the formulas, and we were like, we're never going to get it, and then we'd go out for a hike in the Swiss mountains and all the breakthroughs would come.
Yeah.
And they were just talking and telling stories, the characters, but I noticed every time they talked about when they had a breakthrough is when they left the work and went skiing or went hiking or
Yeah.
went outside.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's not surprising. I mean, it really isn't, but also I think a lot of people get breakthroughs while they're sleeping. And it's the
Mm.
same kind of thing as your brainwave states, right? You are in this deep kind of meditative state. And so that connection to the quantum field opens up and you get these downloads in the form of dreams and, you know, pretty cool.
Yes. Do you have any thoughts on the dreamscape, and have you just personally experienced or heard, in your travels with other people, if people's dreams have becoming more intense lately or more frequent or more colorful?
I haven't had clients mention anything about dreams lately. I know my dreams have been a little bit more like intuitive or precognitive, but I haven't confirmed that or spoken about it with other people. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've noticed the same. And
Yeah,
my sample size is me and my family, so I just wanted to see what else was
yeah,
going on.
yeah.
But yes, I have definitely noticed that.
Yeah. And would you connect it to what's going on with the Schumann resonance and the solar flares that we're getting?
Possibly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Possibly, yes.
Yeah. Well,
So, and I haven't taken the time to like really dig into it, but I do think there's something. Yeah.
yeah. And so that kind of ties us then back into the consciousness conversation is, if you follow any accounts that talk about the Schumann resonance and or the solar flares and how we're getting these energetic upgrades, that is what David Hawkins referred to in the 80s when as a collective we just passed over that threshold into truth, and that's when people really began seeking truth about medications, truth about food, truth about all sorts of things, right? And so we are receiving these energetic upgrades that are allowing us to expand our level of consciousness. But at the same time, you're going to be called to dig through these anger, shame, and fear emotions so that you're no longer, perpetuating them or hanging on to them so that you can experience that expansion. And then when people talk about 3D reality, what I think it's referring to is anger, shame, and fear. And in order to move into this 5D reality or anything beyond that, is through the processing of these emotions and getting ourselves closer to that frequency of love. And then when you think about love and light are synonymous, right? And so we're getting all of these light codes. I mean, we're expanding our heart, we're expanding our awareness. It's all kind of one and the same, just everybody's using a different language to describe it, which makes it seem like there's all something separate, but I think it's all the same.
That makes a lot of sense. So when you use the words light codes, because I loved what you said earlier about being discerning with our
Yeah.
language. I think as we move closer to truth, the discernment piece becomes really important
Yeah.
just in general. That wasn't my point though. So the light codes. And then, okay, so as we as a collective move more towards emitting a frequency of love, shall I say. And then we're talking about the changes in the Schumann resonance. We're talking about the solar flares. I'm working on a talk and I'm looking at like the Kali Yuga cycles, the Mayan cycles, the Chinese cosmology cycles, and then as well as some more like material, just history cycles, economic cycles. And like, it's been so interesting no matter like I started out, I'll just look at one or two as to make a point, and now I'm like I've got like a list of like 9 of them, and they all have an overlap, which is that this moment in time is basically insanely crazy in terms of transformation,
Mm,
like no matter which of those systems you look at.
right.
And so now I'm hearing from you, like even as another lens through
Yeah.
which to view this shift, and you're talking Schumann resonance, solar flares, light codes. And is it our consciousness affecting that, or is it,
Mm,
how do you see it? Like, are we driving that? Is it driving us? Is it a symbiotic?
interesting. I hadn't really, I guess I kind of just assumed it was affecting us, but when you say that, it's like, well, it's all a bi-directional relationship, so we've got to be feeding something back into it. But yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
wow, I mean, that's definitely something to consider and to apply it to, these other time periods in history where there was a lot of chaos. As we're expanding and moving closer towards love, there is going to be a lot of chaos because people have to work through that anger, shame, and fear. And that means a lot of release, a lot of stirring the pot from, the bottom all the way up. And so it may look a little ugly for a while, but I think we're already beginning to see the shift in, the way people are viewing things and viewing themselves in relationship to the collective.
Yes. Yeah, I think so too. And that was, yeah, that's definitely a big piece of it, is there's like a destabilizing
Yeah.
piece to transformation. And so ideally you want the old systems that aren't working to give way to the new ones, but not so fast that we're all buried in the rubble, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the more I understood about shame, and, of course, with the election coming up this year, or, happening this year, and I started to view the political stage through the lens of shame and societal structures. There, anything that ends in ism is based on shame. And so it requires us to disown ourselves for it to be able to function the way that it functions. And the minute that we all step back into our own personal power is the minute those systems are no longer valid or operational for us, right? Because that's not how we view ourselves anymore.
Yes, that's a beautiful way to describe it. And that's how it feels to me. And that's how I feel like I'm seeing it. It's like even the old, back to what you're saying about discerning language, even the language tools that we use, left, right, this political party, that political party, like they're becoming almost meaningless. And it's really about people who want to live in the truth
Yeah.
and not be controlled,
Yeah.
versus people who are like, no, 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 these systems are better. It's better to have the system controlling us. That's more where I see
Yeah.
the shift. And it has, red, blue, purple, up, down, left,
Yeah.
right. Like it's those things are dissolving and becoming largely irrelevant.
Yeah. But it's all part of the process. It's not, not judging other people where they're at and how maybe they orient towards safety, because for them, safety is those systems, right? They're relying on those systems to keep them safe. But at some point in their journey, they will butt up against those very systems, and they'll be asked to look within and reevaluate and, ask the question, is this system really working for me, or is it working against me? And we're all just at different stages of that journey. And, I think over the coming generations, I just don't see these systems being in place anymore.
Yeah, I don't either. And I think the point you're making is really good. And it's actually was kind of the point of this talk I'm going to give, is that for those of us who can orient around the new paradigms, who can feel safe and grounded in the world, even in the midst of all this change, I feel like we have some level of responsibility
Yeah.
to show up for the people you just described who are not there yet. And it's going to feel really scary, and they're going to be very disoriented. And especially people in that space where the systems that they trusted, and we've all been there, probably everyone listening to a podcast like this has been there, right? That system that we trusted has betrayed us.
Right.
And when you feel that betrayal of the system or the institution that your whole life you felt like you could rely on, and you don't have an alternative,
Right.
that's a terrifying and scary place to be. And that's where I feel like we all collectively have a responsibility to help navigate that for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful point. And I've been saying this to my clients and also in mine and Lauren's podcast. I think our souls speak different languages. And so different people speak different language. Meh, that's not a very good way to describe it, but I think our souls have their own unique language, and each person, when we tap into the language of our own soul, that becomes the language that we speak, we resonate at. And the people who have souls that speak my language will be drawn towards me, and the ones that speak your language will be drawn towards you. We each are holding a piece of the puzzle, like you just said, and so our duty is to take it back out there and find the people that speak our language so we can spread the message. I mean, that sounds very religious or something, but to help others navigate their own experience.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. And it could be, you and I are doing podcasts, but it could just be like you're that person in your extended family or in your friend group
Yeah.
that's like seems kind of okay and chill. And so when someone needs to access that, like, I remember I heard a man, I'm pretty sure it was a Christian man, but it doesn't matter. But he was saying that, what did he say? He said, we have to have a spiritual practice
Mm,
so that when people need us, and they will, we are who we say we are.
yeah. Yeah.
And that always stayed with me. It's like,
It's
when someone reaches out, who
yeah.
are we?
Yeah, it's part of it, it is also part of the nervous system work is understanding your own personal values, because what those emotions, when they arise, what they're telling you is what you value. They're telling you about your own soul's values. And so if you're getting angry when someone lies, you value honesty, you value integrity, you value transparency, whatever, right? And so that spiritual practice is making sure that you are connected to something higher than yourself and your soul, and so that you are operating in alignment with your own personal values, like you said. So when someone comes to you, you can you are in alignment and you're not saying one thing and doing another.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. This has been so interesting, Kelly. I love it so much. Is there anything like coming to you that you want to say next, or that you wanted to
Um,
say that you haven't said?
no, I don't think so. I just the connection between the nervous system and consciousness, and then also you can add in the piece of like internal family systems model, which is the core self energy and the parts that we develop as like coping strategies to navigate the world. They're all describing the same thing. And so that makes the end goal from all three models, the end goal is love. So, finding our way back to love in whichever way you can begin to do that. And we can do it in very small ways in our day-to-day life. So you don't have to go out and hire some coach and have some massive transformation. You can do a lot of the work on your own at home.
Yeah, it's true. It's in all the little moments of the day.
Yeah.
Although I will say working with someone is often helpful. So if anyone resonates, go work with Kelley.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then just to bring it back to the light piece before we wrap up, it's like, I'll use myself as the example, right? So I did a lot of the work that, you're describing. And I still got sick. And I think there was a part of me that was judging myself for that. And it's like, oh, if you've like mastered your mind and healed your childhood, like why are you getting sick, right? But I was missing the piece where I understood the impact that my environment was having on me, and particularly light. Yeah. So I added that in, and it was like, yeah. But I found over time that it's, as you were saying at the beginning, it's like, it's a spiral.
Yeah.
And so I feel it then, as I've infused myself with healthy light over time, that has called me to up level back in the other ways.
Yeah.
And then I go back in the light, and I'm starting to hear from people who've been doing this a few years that they're like becoming off the charts intuitive, borderline psychic, and all of these things are starting to happen as we continually move through.
Yeah. Because that love and light are synonymous with each other. They're often referred to as one and the same throughout ancient texts and history, right? And so it's not surprising that going out into the sunlight expands your level of consciousness and unburdens the heart to some degree and fills you with love,
Right.
Very cool. It's pretty cool.
Pretty cool.
It's all just so fascinating. It really is. And it's all so exciting. And to even have a platform to share this kind of information, like I just never thought, I never imagined this would be my life, or that I would be sitting here talking to you about love and consciousness and light and all of these things. It's really profound. We live in a really awesome time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I was like working on that presentation, and I'm like making notes about astrology and frequency. And I was at a co-working space, and the woman next to me, I saw her glance down at my notes, and I was like, yeah, this is what I'm doing for my job. It's pretty incredible. And then we have these platforms to share it. Yeah, no, I don't know what, I don't want to use terms that will activate people in one way or the other, but however we all ended up here at the same time in this moment of time is, as you said, deeply profound.
Yes. There are no coincidences, I don't believe. So,
yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Meredith. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being here, Kelley. This was wonderful, and we will be doing it again.
Okay, sounds great.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who practices from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely take a look at the Applied Quantum Biology Certification, a 6-week study of the science of the new human health paradigm and its practical application with your patients and clients. We also love to feature graduates of the program on this very podcast. Until next time, the QBC.